Every autumn, millions of people across the world drag branches to the curb, they stuff them into plastic bags, they torch them in backyard fires, and in a single afternoon, decades of free water, free fertilizer, and living soil goes up in smoke. But what if I told you that the very wood you're burning right now could end drought in your backyard forever? What if burying that wood, just a few feet underground, could grow lemons? In the middle of the snow, not in a greenhouse, not with any special equipment, just wood buried in the earth. This is not a theory, this is not some internet gardening hack. This happened in the Austrian Alps, and a farmer named Sepp Holzer proved it to the world. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn changes everything you think you know about soil. Sepp Holzer never set out to become a rebel. He was a farmer in the Austrian Alps, a quiet man, someone who watched mountains and listened to soil. But in the 1980s, that quiet listening turned his farm into a battleground. Inspectors started showing up at his gate, clipboards in hand, government officials measuring his terraces, his ponds, his mounds of strange, heaping soil. Every mound, every pile of buried wood, every pond he dug without permission earned him another fine. His neighbors followed the rules: flat fields, straight rows, government-approved crops. But Holzer built hills out of rotting logs and planted citrus trees where only spruce had grown. Officials called it reckless. They worried about floods, about erosion, about the chaos of untamed land. They handed him violation after violation, sometimes dozens in a single year, and by the end of the decade, Sepp Holzer was known as the most fined farmer in Austria. He smiled about it later and said, "I am the most fined farmer." The fines kept coming, thousands of shillings, then euros, each one demanding he return to the old ways. But Holzer kept building, even as he faced the threat of losing his land entirely. In 1986, after heavy rains, authorities accused him of creating illegal water retention mounds. He paid the penalty, then appealed, arguing that his ponds and terraces prevented the very disasters they feared. In 1989, the pressure peaked. The agricultural board threatened to seize his farm. Holzer's response was simple. He invited them to see his yields, and when they came, they saw lemons, kiwis, grapes, root vegetables flourishing on slopes where nothing but grass had grown before. His farm produced 10 times more food than any neighbor, 10 times, without irrigation, without chemical fertilizer, without anything the modern agricultural handbook recommended. By 1992, the government could not ignore the evidence. Citrus trees bending under the weight of fruit, vegetables thriving on slopes that had no business growing anything exotic. Holzer wrote simply, "My yields silenced them." And slowly, they did. The fines never stopped him. They only made him more certain. Nature, left to its own wisdom, can outlast any bureaucracy. Now let me paint you a picture, because I want you to actually feel this. Imagine standing on a steep Alpine hillside. It is October. Frost is already settling on the fields. The air bites at your face, and hanging in front of you, bright yellow against a backdrop of snow and pine trees, are lemons, real lemons, dangling in the alpine wind, their skins smooth and fragrant next to them. Kiwi vines climbing alongside spruce trees, fuzzy fruit swelling under cold mountain skies, and grapes ripening on slopes where the neighbors struggle to even grow grass. No hoses snake through these beds, no sprinklers tick through the night. The water comes from within the earth itself, pulled up through roots that reach deep into mounds of buried wood below. The soil here is dark, loose, laced with the sweet scent of decay, and even in the dead of winter, green shoots push through the mulch, fed by the slow heat of rotting logs breaking down underground. Neighbors came to stare. Inspectors who once arrived with fine books now came with cameras, because the evidence was impossible to ignore where others saw barren slopes. Holzer was gathering abundance, and this was not a trick. No greenhouse glass, no hidden irrigation pipes, no secret fertilizer. The secret was buried underfoot. So what exactly was happening beneath that soil? Let me break this down, because the science here is genuinely fascinating. At the heart of every Hugelkultur mound lies one simple, overlooked miracle. Rotting wood is a sponge, not a metaphorical sponge, a literal, physical sponge. Built by nature's own architecture, the cell walls of wood, made mostly of a compound called lignin, form a labyrinth of tiny tunnels and pores. When wood begins to decay, those pathways open wider, rainwater and snowmelt seep in, flooding every chamber. In laboratory tests, Heavily decomposed pine logs have soaked up water, equal to 5 times their own dry weight, 500%. Oak slower to break down, still doubles or triples its mass with moisture now on the surface. A Hugelkultur bed looks like any raised garden mound. Soil, mulch, maybe some vegetable plants trailing across the top. But if you drove a moisture probe deep into that mound, in the middle of July, when neighboring gardens are wilting, when hoses are running day and night, the probe would find moisture levels that rival a spring rain. Field readings show 40 to 60% soil moisture inside the mound, while the topsoil above is cracking in the sun. The buried logs below, swollen with water, are slowly releasing it upward to the roots. It is a hidden reservoir, recharged with every passing storm and drained slowly. Over weeks and months of dry weather, here is something even more remarkable. As fungi and microbes eat away at the wood's cell walls, the wood becomes less dense. A chunk of pine that started solid enough to sink in water eventually becomes light and airy, like a natural sponge in one study. Degraded pine dropped to just 18 grams per cubic centimeter, less than half its original density, and every gram of that decayed wood can trap several grams of water even after months without rain. Roots find moisture, where the eye sees only dust. But the buried wood doesn't just hold water, it also heats the soil. The moment the first shovel of soil covers that wood, something begins. Microbes and fungi swarm through the moist, decaying logs, breaking down lignin and cellulose. Their work is invisible. But it is exothermic. Every bite of wood releases a pulse of heat, warming the soil from the inside out, even in the biting cold of an alpine winter. The ground above a buried log can register several degrees warmer than the surrounding air, and noticeably warmer than the flat fields around it. This is not just comfort for roots. This is a survival advantage. Seeds germinate earlier in spring. Frosts that would kill young shoots on bare ground pass harmlessly over these mounds, buffered by the slow, steady warmth rising from below. In autumn, the growing season lingers. Tomatoes and squash ripen weeks after neighboring gardens have withered, and as the years roll by, the buried wood transforms from a simple heater into something even more valuable. A trust fund for your soil. The breakdown of logs is a marathon, not a sprint. Hardwoods like oak and maple can take 20 years to fully decompose. During that entire time, the wood releases nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium at a pace that matches the needs of the plants above. No boom and bust cycles, no flush of fertility followed by collapse, just a slow, reliable infusion. Year after year after year, field trials and long-term gardens confirm what Holzer saw. A well-built Hugelkultur bed can feed crops for 20 years or more, without a single bag of added fertilizer. The nutrients are locked inside the wood, released only as the microbes finish their patient work, even after a decade. The soil in the heart of a mound can test higher for nitrogen and phosphorus than the surrounding ground. This is not a quick fix. This is a legacy. So if this works so well, why did we stop doing it? The answer comes down to one word: machines. After the 1920s, tractors and harvesters rolled onto farmland everywhere, and machines demand flat surfaces, no bumps, no mounds. Nothing that could slow a steel wheel or jam a plow. Efficiency became the new religion. More ground covered per hour, fewer obstacles, higher yields per machine. Fields were scraped level, brush was burned, the landscape was reworked to suit the needs of machines, not roots. The promise of speed and scale replaced the slow, patient fertility of buried wood, and as the mounds disappeared, so did their hidden reservoirs. What remained was a blank canvas, easy for machines, but hungry for fertilizer, hungry for irrigation, hungry for everything we now haul in from outside. Today, droughts are getting worse, fertilizer prices are climbing, and millions of people are still burning. What could become reservoirs beneath their gardens? Every branch you torch is a sponge you'll never have. Every pile of brush you haul away is 20 years of free fertilizer gone in an afternoon. All right, let's get practical, because I don't just want you to find this interesting. I want you to actually do this. Building a Hugelkultur bed is simpler than it sounds, and you can start with whatever you already have. Step 1. Start right on top of the grass. You do not need to clear anything first. Just mark out the shape of your bed. It can be straight, it can curve, it can wind through your entire backyard if you want. Step 2. Lay your foundation logs, the bigger and more rotten the better. Oak and maple work best. Hardwood breaks down slowly and feeds your soil for years, but there are woods to avoid. Never use cedar, never use black walnut, never use anything treated with chemicals. These woods release compounds that poison roots and stall the whole process. Stack your logs tightly. Fill every gap with smaller branches and twigs. This is not a loose pile. Every air pocket is a future sinkhole. Step 3. Add your nitrogen layer. This step is critical, and skipping it is the #1 mistake beginners make. Here is why. Rotting wood is hungry for nitrogen, desperately hungry, if you just bury logs and cover them with soil. The microbes breaking down that wood will steal nitrogen from your plants. Your seedlings will yellow, growth will stall, and you'll wonder what went wrong. So before you add soil, pack every crevice with nitrogen-rich material, fresh grass clippings, aged manure, kitchen scraps, even urine works, believe it or not. Layer it thick. Step 4, cap the mound, add a foot of good topsoil and mulch. Water it deeply in the first year. And then, mostly, leave it alone, because after that first season, the mound begins to handle itself. Now I want to share a few real stories, because theory is one thing, but watching it work in someone's backyard, that changes everything. There is a retired school teacher who built her first mound with storm-felled maple logs. She packed every gap with grass clippings and manure. By the second spring, she coiled up her hose and never unrolled it again, even in August. Her soil stays cool and damp. Her tomatoes get more water from the earth than she ever gave them from the tap. Her water bill dropped so sharply. The city sent a notice asking if her meter was broken. Then there is the suburban homeowner who turned last year's brush pile into a serpentine bed winding through his backyard. He tracked every dollar. No fertilizer bags, no weekly irrigation, just kitchen scraps and autumn leaves. By the end of the first year, his harvest was the largest he had ever seen. And the savings paid for his entire seed order. Twice over. Not every story starts perfectly. One permaculture enthusiast watched her seedlings yellow and stall. She had skipped the manure. Trusting the wood alone, the nitrogen trap got her, but she caught the mistake. Dug in fresh grass clippings, added a wheelbarrow of compost, and within weeks, the bed sprang back to life, peas and squash exploding from soil that had been stubbornly silent before. Her mistake became her proof, and every one of these stories carries the same refrain. Bury the wood, and the ground gives back for years. We live in a world obsessed with instant results, quick fixes, overnight solutions, but Hugelkultur offers something rare, a promise, that with the right foundation, your soil will only grow richer. As the years go by, every branch you bury is a quiet act of resilience. Every rotting log is a future reservoir. Every handful of decaying leaves is decades of free fertilizer. Waiting patiently underground, the ground remembers what you give it. Sepp Holzer understood that. He paid thousands in fines to prove it. He grew lemons in the snow to prove it, and 40 years later, his terraces are still producing, still watering themselves, still feeding roots that reach deep into wood. That nobody can even see anymore, so this autumn, before you light that pile of branches on fire, ask yourself, what if I buried this instead? If this video changed how you think about your soil? Share it with someone who still burns their branches, and tell me in the comments. Are you going to try this? Because I genuinely want to know. See you in the next one.